What's going on, guys? Wei from Revolution here to introduce our new online watch writer, Jeremiah Chan. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Hey guys, good to see you. We're just here chatting, and always good to sit down with Wei when we can catch him. And today we'd like to talk about a brand that's really close to his heart, which is Cartier. So tell us, Wei, how did you start your journey with Cartier?
Jeremiah, thank you for asking. So Cartier, as you mentioned very accurately, is very close to my heart. I think like a lot of guys, I went through a journey through watches, right? Where I started with sports watches, Panerais, Rolexes, all that kind of thing. And then I started to move into complications, got initially into chronographs, still love chronographs, of course. Then, of course, I went into complicated watches, well, to the extent to which I could afford complicated watches,
Sure.
Which was, to be honest, not very far, right? And then, of course, like everyone else, I got into independent watchmaking. And I still love all of those. But it's funny because when you get to a certain point in your watch journey, you kind of want just something really pure and elemental and elegant. And I think when you get to that point, that's when you feel the calling towards Cartier. Right?
I agree.
I think the analogy I like to use is if Rolex is the king of sports watches and Patek Philippe is the king of complications, then I would say that Cartier is the king of elegance, right?
Correct.
And I think the thing that was really meaningful to me was that since Cyril Vigneron has come on board as the CEO of the brand, he's really brought the brand back in alignment with being a huge and extraordinary reflection of elegance. Like everything they do is related to style. He also says that technical innovation is great, but only when it serves the needs of design, right? Which I totally agree with. Right. So yeah, that's what started me on my love affair. And I remember the watch that made me go crazy was in 2019. They did a limited edition of the Singularity.
Right.
Right. And this watch, which was created in 1921, which celebrated its 100th anniversary last year, I've always been enamored with that watch. I just think it's extraordinary. I love how attenuated and curved it is. So incredibly modern for something that came out in the 20s. So I saw that watch and I was like, hey guys, I love this watch. Can I buy one? And I'd asked for a specific number, and they said sure. Then in the end, there was a bit of confusion because I think someone else had already asked for that. So they incredibly kindly asked me, listen, would you be interested in NSO piece? So NSO means new special order, the special order department. And of course, my mind was blown. I couldn't believe they were actually asking me this. And I was like, yeah, sure. And that
How could you refuse?
Yeah, exactly. That turned into this watch. Well, actually it turned into two watches because the designs were so beautiful. And I was in Burgundy looking at the designs, and my friend Mo Capoletta, the famous tattoo artist, was there with me. And he's like, dude, these designs are amazing. Which one are you going to take? And I was like, I was going to take this one, which became this watch. Then he said, well, can I take this other one? So I asked on his behalf, and Cartier, amazingly, after reresearching him a bit, understanding he's a serious watch collector, said yes.
Incredible.
So this is the watch that Cartier made for me in 2019. It is a pièce unique, or NSO, platinum watch. And I wanted something with a salmon dial.
Right.
And then I wanted burgundy Roman numerals, which I thought would be a really nice contrast as well. And then I kept the sort of a baton hands because I wanted to keep the modernism of the watch.
Yeah.
Right, so there you go.
Wow, this is incredible. I've only seen this in the video with Mo, but
cool.
Holding it in my hands, it's just the weight of it. It's platinum, right?
It's significant, isn't it?
Yeah.
And bear in mind also there's two different types of constructions for the Singularity. So last year they did one which was a complete tribute to the original way that the Singularity is made, which is even thinner than that watch, which is not water resistant because the original one wasn't.
Yeah.
But I think what's so amazing about that watch was it looks as relevant and as fresh as the day it was born 100 years ago. And this brings up a really interesting topic to me. So, right now the watch industry is booming. Can we agree?
Yes,
right?
it is.
Trying to get something like that is, impossible.
Unobtainium.
Right? It's like unobtainium, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, but we had a precedent to this. I think there's this philosopher that says George Santayana, right? And he says those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it, right?
Yes.
And yeah, so there's a precedent to what happened or what's happening now, and that was from 2000 to 2008. And you saw this incredible meteoric rise of watches, independent watches, every form of watches. And then in 2009, we had the financial crisis,
the big crash.
right? Well, what started off as the U.S. subprime crisis, which then eventually became the worldwide economic crisis.
Right.
And basically, I would say 99% of brands were decimated by this, right?
Yeah.
So what makes a brand in a crisis successful as opposed to a brand that's not successful, right? Well, to me, it's about singularity, which is what Cyril Vigneron always talks about, right? It means about a brand who in that specific category is the best and no one can touch it. So who benefited during that period? Rolex, right? Who benefited during that period? Patek,
yeah.
right? You know? And I think that, not that I'm saying another crisis is looming on the horizon, however, if something were to happen, because I think we can all agree, as Cyril Vigneron likes to put it, the only thing that's certain today is uncertainty, right? And he says very correctly that there are going to be more and more black swan events looming on the horizon. So even though times are really good now, I would urge every watch brand, today who's successful to make sure that you protect yourself in the future should anything happen. And the best way you can do that is through singularity.
Right. A clarity of focus.
Absolutely, clarity of focus. Either you're the king of complications like Patek, or the king of sports watches like Rolex, or the king of elegance like Cartier. And Cartier will be totally insulated. This I'm absolutely sure of.
I think so too.
You know what I mean? Regardless of what happens, and that's because it's been realigned as that king of elegance, right? So, so you saw me initially. I was double wristing it.
Yeah, from one pièce unique to I think another.
So that brings us to the reason why we're having this video today, actually. So I wanted to surprise you guys and show you my new watch, which is the world's first Cartier Crash Luminous watch, right? So it is a midnight blue Cartier Crash with, for the first time, luminous hands and indexes. And I have nicknamed the watch First Light. So Crash First Light, right?
Cool, yeah.
Many years ago, I used to work in Los Angeles for a filmmaker named Catherine Bigelow, who did Point Break.
Oh, right, okay.
And then her production company was...
Oh, and the Hurt Locker, was that?
Yes.
Yes.
In fact, she won the Academy Award for the Hurt Locker. And so her production company was called First Light. And I was like, that's a cool name. Maybe I'll use it one day. And then when I got the chance to create the first Luminous Crash, I was like, dude, perfect name.
Perfect, yeah.
So, okay, let's talk a little bit about the Crash as well, right? Because here you have a design from 1921. And then on my wrist, you have a design from 1967, both of which I feel are equally iconic, and both of which I feel are equally singular, and as Cyril Vigneron likes to say, durable, meaning that they endure forever, right?
Yes.
But they were born in two very different eras, and they were created by two very different people as well, right? So let's talk a little bit about Cartier family history.
Yeah, we should. And I think, I'm no expert, but I know Cartier was founded in 1847 by Louis-Francois Cartier, and he purchased the small jewelry workshop that he was an apprentice at from his master and mentor, Adolphe Picard.
Yes, precisely.
And I think the first Cartier boutique was opened at Boulevard des Italiens in 1859.
Correct.
And I think by 1899, Alfred Cartier was Louis-Francois' son. Alfred Cartier was already involved in the business.
And he moved it to
13 Rue de la Paix.
Where it still is, actually.
Where it still is, the iconic flagship in Paris, the exclusive shopping district.
And Jeremiah, if I'm not mistaken, Alfred had 3 sons. And I like it because it reminds me of kind of like a classic kind of fable, right?
Yeah.
So each of the 3 sons had a different destiny. So he took his sons Pierre, Jacques, and Louis, and gave them each oversight over a specific Cartier temple, as he liked to call them, right?
Yeah.
So Pierre's job was to go to America and develop that market. So.
Well, interestingly, before Pierre moved to New York, Alfred sent him to Russia to understudy with the famous Fabergé.
Incredible.
Yeah, before he moved to New York.
Amazing. Yeah. And one of my favorite stories about Pierre is that when he moved to New York, it was initially not in the current mansion on Fifth Avenue.
I think he was at 712 Fifth Avenue, the first one,
and
in 1909.
And then after that, he moved to?
653.
Very good. And if I'm not mistaken, what was really cool about that was he bought that building for a double string of pearls, right? Which at the time were valued for $1 million US.
Yeah, which was a much larger valuation than the building itself, which was I think $925,000 at the time.
Incredible. Yeah. So if I'm not mistaken, it was $100 in cash.
And the string of pearls.
The string of pearls.
Exactly.
Right. And then you had Jacques, and Jacques went to London, right?
Yes.
And eventually established himself on Bond Street, the mythical Bond Street, where the Cartier boutique still is.
Yes.
And then you had Louis, who stayed in Paris.
Yeah, right? Louis, the eldest son.
So the thing that was interesting about Louis was he was clearly a design genius, right? So in 1904, he creates the Santos Dumont watch for his buddy Alberto Santos Dumont, the Franco-Brazilian aviator/dandy, right? Yeah. In 1919, he creates the tank. In 1921, he creates this extraordinary watch, right? So most of the iconic watches that we think of from Cartier have a tendency to be created by Louis, right? And
Yeah.
have a tendency to be associated with Paris.
Yes.
But actually, this watch is really representative of a much later generation, right? So Jacques, who went to London, had a son named Jean-Jacques,
Yeah.
right? And Jean-Jacques became in charge of Cartier London.
Yeah, but I think even before that, because Cartier London they had employed designers, jewelers, even goldsmiths, but they were not, like you said, producing or designing wristwatches on their own. And the designs were coming up from the Paris flagship,
Correct,
or from Switzerland. Yeah.
Amazing.
So I think Jean-Jacques decided that they would probably have to produce something on their own that would be representative of Cartier London as well.
Well, this is the thing that I find so interesting. So if you look at the entire history of Cartier watches, right, the Cartier London watches, and I don't mean just the Crash, I mean all of the watches that came out of that period, the Tongtien Trays, the Maxi Ovals, which is the English name for the Benoit Allongé,
Yeah.
they are so collectible right now because they have a dial iconography that's in some ways similar, but in some ways completely different. So it almost as if it was like Jean-Jacques looked at the dials that were created by his uncle Louis, and took the Roman numerals, elongated them, took away the serifs, right? Discarded the chemin de fer and created
Yeah.
this really cool, bold, almost pop art-like approach
Yeah.
to design for the dials.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, so I think it was just representative of the time, especially the cultural upheaval that we saw in the 60s in London, with the changes in fashion, with the mod culture, miniskirts
Yeah.
on the ladies.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, rock and roll in
Yes.
music. Yeah,
Right.
and I think, that definitely had a big influence on the design of the Crash.
Absolutely. As you know, I am a fan of beautiful women, and I always try to think of the most iconic women I can from the period of the 60s, right? And one of my favorite images from that period is Jean Shrimpton, who's this famous model, walking around Carnaby Street in the rain barefoot, right?
Right.
And I think that's a wonderful image to depict like that era because it was so free, everything
Yeah.
was so open, everyone was so receptive to cultural change.
Yeah.
And in the context of this milieu, you've got Jean-Jacques who's like, you know what? We need to create a new watch that's representative of this new mindset, a
Right.
watch of rebellion,
Yeah, and
Ethical-
independence.
Exactly. Independence, rebellion, and the confidence for a new generation.
Right.
So this brings us to the Crash, and now we're going to tell you 3 theories related to the origin of the Crash.
Yeah, I think, if I could start with probably the most well-known, I think legend has it that there was a car crash and a Cartier bag noir was found completely molten and melted, and it was brought into the Cartier London boutique, hopefully to be fixed. And I think the designers were so completely enamored with how the shape had completely melted, right? And they took that as inspiration. But I think that's more of an urban legend than anything else.
It's a great story. It's probably the most evocative story, and of course that story is cool because it gives this watch its name, the Crash, which is
Right.
unforgettable. Okay, the second 2 theories are, the first is that there was we should also mention that Jean-Jacques worked a lot with a case maker and a designer
Right.
named
Rupert Emerson.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so he and Rupert Emerson were probably looking around for inspiration, and there is a painting from 1931, so quite a few years earlier, called The Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali, which is a seminal work of surrealism, right?
Yeah, incredible work.
Yeah. And if you look at it, there's several different melted clocks on there. And if you look at the clock that's on the far left of this sort of like Freudian landscape, this sort of dreamscape, it is melted in such a way that it looks almost exactly like the Crash. In fact, if
Yes.
you were just to flip it 180 degrees, you'd be like, dude, that's the Crash.
That's the shape, yeah.
Exactly. So the last theory is proposed by Francesca Cartier-Brittle. She was talking about her relationship with her grandfather Jean-Jacques. And
Yeah.
she remembered him saying that he wanted to create a watch that was really representative of this new spirit of rebellion that was in the United Kingdom and specifically London. And she said that he wanted to take a maxi oval or a Benoit Allongé, and he wanted to pinch it at both ends, here and here, and put a kink in the center, and then therefore created this watch that was completely unlike anything else, and was really a symbol of the rebellion and the youthquake and all the modernism of that era.
I think that's the most likely story.
Yes. However, the thing that's interesting to me is that I also think that's the most likely story, and I of course believe her, but it still doesn't mean that he wasn't inspired by the Salvador Dali painting.
True. I mean, we will never know for sure, but with things like watch history, it's always good to have some romanticism attached to it.
Right, absolutely. So let's go through the different versions of the Crash that have been made until modern day before I start talking about my watch. So there was, of course, these watches that were made in London from
1967,
And all the way through.
probably about the early 90s.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's from what I can understand. That's it as well. And those watches would be called Cartier London Crashes and have London on the dial.
Correct.
Then in 1991, there was a limited edition that was.
Which had Paris on the dial instead of London. That was only in 400 pieces,
Right.
and I think most likely all in yellow gold.
Correct. Okay. And after that, there was a watch that was launched as a woman's piece in 2013.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about the women's piece is there were two versions in
Oh.
two metals. Yeah.
Fantastic.
One in pink gold and one in white gold, both with diamond set cases. 267 pieces each with a teardrop-shaped matching precious metal bracelet.
It's the bracelet that's really cool. on that
Yes,
watch.
very, very cool.
Yes.
And I think there were pieces made completely paved with diamonds. I think over 450 diamonds, yeah, both on the
Fantastic.
case and the bracelet.
Amazing. And then in 2015, it gets kind of exciting because now you have the merger of the Crash iconography with a really interesting movement, a skeletonized movement.
Correct. Yeah, I think that one was the 9618MC manual wind movement from Cartier. And there were two barrels with two mainsprings, and the power reserve was 72 hours.
Fantastic. And made 67 pieces executed in two different materials, right?
I think 2015 was all platinum. Yeah, in 2016, Cartier did another run of 67 in pink gold.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And in 2018, you have the emergence of a watch that is made specifically for the London boutique, right?
Right.
So it's really cool because Cartier, well, actually Cyril, decided, hey, since there's this amazing history for the Crash, let's make London, again, the destination where you can acquire a Crash,
Yeah.
right? So tell us a little bit about those watches.
Well, for the London Crash, the reissue in 2018, now it says Swiss made on the dial.
Right.
I think they kept the reduced size of 38 millimeters.
Right.
And they only were going to produce one piece per month. I'm not sure if they're still doing it now, they probably are. But there was a limited edition run of 15 pieces in white gold with a diamond set case as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the normal configuration is in yellow gold, right?
Correct.
Okay. Hey, it's interesting, Jeremiah, you mentioned reduced size. So walk us through the sizes of the different Crashes.
Well, I think starting from the first Crash in 1967, that was in 43 millimeters by 25 millimeters. And then it was reduced slightly to 38 millimeters in the 1991 400-piece limited edition. In 2013 that we talked about with the ladies' watch, it was also 38 by 25. And then it went upsized for 2015 and 16 for the skeleton Crashes.
I love that watch.
45 by 28.
Nice.
And then it came back down again slightly with the London reissues. Yeah.
Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the secondary values of these watches, because Crashes have become secondary market and auction darlings for some reason.
Yeah, prices have gone insane, I would say. I mean, not to be critical, but these are incredible, incredible watches. And I recall, I think the world record-setting auction result was in 2021 at Sotheby's. I think that was a London Crash, and that one went for 806,500 Swiss francs.
Incredible.
Yeah, but even now, if you talk about the London Crashes, they're going for twice retail, on the secondary market.
Oh, these are the boutique editions?
Yes,
Wow.
that's right.
Very naughty of you have one of those if you flipped it, incidentally. Unless your name
Please
is,
don't.
Unless your name is Gregory Powell. So what I think is extraordinary about these watches is that the Crashes have somehow become, clearly the watch that people want, right? Regardless of what they're interested in. And we were talking about rappers, but recently we had people like Kanye West wearing a Crash, Tyler the Creator wearing
Yes,
a Crash,
yeah.
Jay-Z wearing a
Jay-Z,
skeleton
yeah.
one. What's going on? Why has the Crash become something super interesting to contemporary culture?
I think we probably have to look into hip-hop culture for a little bit, to kind of explain the phenomenon. I think hip-hop started in the Bronx in New York in the 1970s, but I think it only really gained maybe traction and popularity, in most people's minds in the 1990s with gangster rap.
I was a young man then.
Right.
I remember.
You remember
very
those
vividly.
times, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, with NWA, and
Yes.
it was just kind of a expression and a way of communication to express the frustration that they were feeling by
Social injustice.
by the U.S. government. Yeah.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that they have become now the primary sort of figures in contemporary culture and the primary tastemakers as well, especially guys like Jay-Z, especially guys like Kanye. I actually have no idea who Tyler, the creator, is. I'm sure he's great. So,
Yeah.
But it's so interesting that people who are super individualistic, who are entrepreneurial, who are unique in terms of their thinking, in terms of their creativity, they seem to feel the Crash is a watch for them.
Right.
Although I shouldn't use that as a prelude to discussing my watch, because I am none of those things. I am a watch nerd that just happened to get lucky to be in the right place in the right time.
Right.
And then that brings us to a natural segue about talking about this watch, if I may.
Okay.
So the thing today is, if you want a Crash, you have three ways of getting a Crash. One is to go to the secondary market, as Jeremiah explained, but then you're going to have to pay a fairly substantial premium. The second is to be allocated a watch from the London boutique. But as we've described, the waiting list on the London boutique now,
probably years long.
It probably stretches into infinity, to be honest with you, right? And then the third way is to be permitted into the NSO program, right? So the NSO program, as I was explaining before, is a special order program. And you can create watches based on the existing shapes that Cartier makes. However, they will kind of gently push you back into the right path if you kind of stray off too much and stray too far off-piste from the realm of Cartier.
Right.
Right?
It's not sky's the limit with this.
Well, no, because they want to make things that are a true expression of who they are.
Right.
And the guy who oversees all of this is my dear friend, the legendary Pierre Raniero, who is the head of patrimony and archives for Cartier, but is also the person that individually approves each and every NSO project, right? So even if you are approved for the NSO program, it's still not necessary that they will allow you to make a Crash, because Crashes are kept as a very small production, right? And then I guess the other question is, and this is now going to be a very long video, but it's a valid question. Everyone always asks me, how do you get into the NSO program? Well, guys, we live in a capitalistic culture, right? So obviously you need to be a significant client to Cartier, right? But interestingly, and it was Eric Koo, who is also an incredible Cartier collector and Cartier enthusiast as well. He was the one who expressed it very well. He said Cartier really responds well to people who are genuine in their passion for Cartier, right? And who are genuine in their knowledge, who are genuine in their research, who are genuine in their history, right? And I think that that's really true. I think if Cartier senses that you have a true love for their brand, they might be a bit more receptive to allowing you into that program. I should also mention now that the Cartier people that I know here in Singapore or internationally are some of the most nerded out and geeked out people I know, and I say that as a huge compliment. They have such familiarity and passion for their history, for their patrimony, for every nuance of vintage models, as well as for the modern watches, and they're so knowledgeable. And I love that in a brand. And I think that is the power of a brand. When you have people who are like that really have an understanding, that really have real knowledge, your brand is incredible, right? So I would say also Cyril has been instrumental for that as well. I mean, he's, in addition to realigning the brand, not with sports watches, not with complications, but really with elegance, he's realigned everyone to really be steeped in the patrimony and history of Cartier.
Right.
So back to this watch, after having made this watch, I was trying to think of what I'd like to make next. And at some point, I asked the team here if I could potentially make a Crash. And, I didn't hear back immediately. But to be fair, in a very relatively short period of time, they came back and said, you know what, let's do it. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. It's kind of like when you get like the blessing to get like something that you dreamt about,
right,
and you can see it now manifesting to reality. It's an incredible.
Could you recall how you felt when you got the call, and how was that different from the first time, when you commissioned a pièce unique with the tank centré?
I would say that, I would say the excitement was equally palpable. It was, the Crash, of course, is a mythical creature, so to be able to be a Crash owner was incredible. It also made me be a lot more considered about what it is that I like to create as well, right? And so I was thinking about it, and I, as you know, have a penchant for luminosity in watches, right? Like I love the luminous signature of a watch in an ambient location or in the dark. I don't want to do something for gimmicks, right? Like I don't think it'd be cool just to make it luminous just for the sake of it, but because like all of my watches, or if you look at the limited editions that I've created, with other brands as well, usually have a luminous signature to them, I express the interest in having a luminous Crash. And then they said, well, okay, what color watch, what material? I said, well, I like it to be, you know, white gold. I like it to, I asked for platinum and they said no.
Okay. You've got to try.
I got to try. They said, okay, but I said, color-wise, you know, I leave it entirely to you. And it was really cool because the team who did the designs actually went to my Instagram page, looked at, you know, what I wear and so on.
Okay.
And yeah, and they said, you seem to like blue. And I said, yes. So we discussed blue, and I like the idea of midnight blue that I could wear with a tuxedo, because midnight blue is a color used for tuxedos. That under artificial light actually appears black. The team came back to me and they created the design for this watch, which was really beautiful because they decided that they wanted to use a graduated or subtly fumé dial, meaning that the color in the center is slightly lighter than the color at the edges of the watch, and then with the combination of these beautiful pure white and luminous indexes. And then there was, of course, the conversation about the level of luminosity, because what I didn't want for this particular watch, because it's so elegant, to be like glowing nonstop, right? Like a flashlight on your phone that's always on.
Right.
So I said, listen, I want it to be clearly luminous, but during most conditions, I want it to look like it's just normal, you know, like normal painted indexes.
Right.
And so they got that perfectly right on that watch as well. And then it comes on this beautiful dark blue alligator strap. And yeah, I remember I only received this watch a couple of days ago, and it was one of those moments where you're trying to pinch yourself to make sure that you're not actually having some sort of delusion. The way the Cartier team presented it to me, I don't want to divulge too much, but I can only say it was as elegant as the very sort of core message of the brand itself.
Right. You know, I know you're probably never going to sell this, but you know, if you were, the secondary market price for this is probably going to be more than 806,000 Swiss francs.
Well, it's very kind of you to say, Jeremiah, but like, you know, I feel that anytime someone makes you a pièce unique or allocates you something very special, you basically sign an implicit contract that you'll never sell it. And I never will sell it. I can't speak for my children. I may have a bit of a dickhead child who might sell it eventually. I don't have any children at the moment. I hope not. Right now, these are all being left to my dachshund Bandit, who now has to outlive.
Lucky dog.
Yeah, she's got to outlive me. So that's it. That's my story about my crash. That's the story we wanted to discuss about Cartier, why we feel it's a brand that has really regained its rightful place as the king of elegance, and as a result is both singular and durable, as Cyril Vineron would say.
Couldn't have said it better.
Jeremiah, thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Wei. It was my pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys. Bye.